This is Adrenaline Radio. This is Fred Blanchard, your host, and we have an in-studio guest tonight, Steve Montrelli, and we were talking about his history in motorsports as he moved up the ladder and got more involved from a mechanic to basically an engine builder and people who helped him along the way. And Steve, go ahead, and we were talking about the Hellfire Corvette when we went to station break. Come and continue on with that.
Yeah, well, like I said, I got rid of my car, and I was offered this deal to build the engines for this Hellfire Corvette. And the gentleman's name's Jim Shue, and he's out of Las Vegas, and he's still there today. He came out here, and he had the car built by the guys there on the West Coast here, and a gentleman named Johnny Wright that drove a kind of a factory car was going to be the driver. So it was the Hellfire Corvette, and it said Jim Shue, Johnny Wright on the side of it. And this car, we had it built, and we went out there, and we had, I tried to put the same amount of fuel and everything that I had in my my Firebird, the new breed car, and the car, every time I left the starting line, it would make like a left-hand turn. So we kept backing the thing down, taking lots of power out of the car, and this went on for about 6 months. Well, I was working for Mickey, and I had I wanted to get on to Mickey's, so I went into the engine department and started working on the dyno and building engines for the race cars. He had 3 complete teams, and that was my goal, to be able to run one of those cars.
We haven't really elaborated on it, but I think that in those days it was the early stages of running exotic fuel like nitromethane. Is that pretty much what these cars were running on at that time?
Yeah, these were running 90%, 90, 95, 100% nitro. For a while, I guess a few years earlier, they only ran gasoline. But these at this time, all of the cars, the funny cars, were running anywhere from 85 to 100% nitro. They ran somewhere in the vicinities, anywhere from 720 to 820, we'll say. You know, it would be from the top of the field to the bottom of the field, and somewhere around, we set the record at Long Beach at 203.61 or something like that in 1969, and that was the first car, to my knowledge. I've been asking and asking, trying to find out. I think it was the first car at Long Beach over 200 miles an hour. And when we did run that, see, I'm kind of going ahead of myself here if you want to know the funny story about this thing. The car wouldn't go straight. So when I was working for Mickey, we had all the scales and everything, which at those days they cost probably $1,500 for 4 scales to go under the car so you could see where the weight was on the chassis and you could put some wedge in the car. Like I say, after about 6 months, I asked Mickey if I could borrow those scales and put them under the Hellfire Corvette. So he said yes. We put them under the Hellfire Corvette, and we found out what was wrong with the car, and we fixed it. So we went out to Long Beach that same night, and the car, I didn't put a lot of fuel at the first run, and the car went straight arrow. So we come back, and I hopped it up, and I said, okay, let's go for it. So went up there, and he made a burnout and backed up and left the starting line, and it broke the rear end in the car. The drive shaft broke. In those days, we had a regular drive shaft with universal and an automatic transmission. Well, Johnny was sent to the hospital. I mean, they just checking him out. He was sent to the hospital, and the chassis builder was there. We put the car up on 4 jack stands, and the race shop was just around the corner where he built the race cars. And he went back and fixed the rear end housing and everything and brought it back out to the racetrack. We put it back in the car. Well, this was like 11 in the morning, so Johnny gets back about 2:30, 3:30 from the hospital, and we made a new drive shaft and done all the stuff that we needed to do for the safety part of it. And so I said, well, we got to go for this. We got one more shot to get in the show. So at 6 o'clock, like I say, I hopped this thing up. It had 95% in it, and I changed all the nozzles, and I said, amen, here we go. And this thing went out there, and he made a burnout, and I told him make a long burnout, let the motor get warm, and it come back, and They made another one. And in those days, you could make as many burnouts as you wanted, but you just had to tell the other guy what you were going to do. So we made 2 burnouts, come back, and get behind the finished starting line. And now it's cars going up the starting line, it's making some dry hops, and the flames are over the roof. And this thing goes down the racetrack, and it runs the 2:03.61.
In the days of Mickey Thompson, there obviously had to be other opportunities for you down the line. Maybe you want to elaborate on some of that.
Well, here's what happened. We got Mickey's cars ready to go to Indy on the Memorial Day weekend. And 2 cars went, the blue car and the red car, and they had 2 spare engines each, and I had built a couple of them, and they were in the trucks. And we were going to run the Hellfire Corvette here on the West Coast. Nobody actually knew I worked for Mickey. And every time I would see Mickey at a race, he would walk by when he was going to go to his cars, and he'd say, "Hi, boss," and I'd be running the Hellfire Corvette. Nobody actually knew I was working for him. So we took the Hellfire Corvette, and we were going to run Long Beach on Saturday night, and we went to Carlsbad on Sunday. And so Saturday night at Long Beach, we won the race, and we got everything ready, and we had absolutely no spare parts whatsoever. And we maintained the car, and we went to Carlsbad the next day, and we won Carlsbad also. So now this is 2 days in a row, and this is kind of unheard of. So anyways, in the final round at Carlsbad, we kick a rod out of it in the lights, have a minor fire, but we got a broken motor, and there's still a race the next day. A friend of mine, C&O Automotive, the guy I talked about the nostalgic cars, when I worked for him, he had bought all of Frank Petragon Sr.'s equipment when he quit, all the motor parts. Well, I rebuilt all those motors, and we had them sitting there. Well, the last thing I took a short block and took all of these oddball parts that were left and made a short block out with an oil pan with a gear drive on the front of it. But it had 3 different length rods, 3 different pistons in it, and everything else. But it was still a runner, and it was sitting there. Well, on the way home, trying to figure out what we're going to do, I said, well, we got to get home, take the motor apart, see if the camshaft will come out of the motor, see if the cylinder heads are okay. And if the camshaft was okay and the cylinder heads were okay, I knew where there was a short block. So I called Gino. I said, "Gino, I want to buy that short block." He says, "Oh, I know what you're talking about." And I says, "Well, I want to buy that short block." And I said, "I'll give you $250 for it." He says, "Come and get it." The girls went over there in my wife's 1978 Oldsmobile 4-door, opened the trunk, and they threw the short block in it. They came back, and we started putting the motor back together. Here we are. We finally got everything back together, and we were going to the I believe it was Irwindale race. And we got there, and they took the car, and the driver gets out of the sleeper, and he walks over to me, and he says, "How are you going to tune this car?" And I said, "Just get in it and drive it." And we went up, and we needed to qualify for the race. And with this oddball motor in the car, never run it, never even started it until we got there. We went up there and ran low ET and top speed of the meet. And lo and behold, we won the race. So we won all 3 days. And this is what so Mickey's cars went to Indy, and one of the cars was runner-up. Well, this is when Mickey got back from that race on Wednesday, I guess it was. I was in the engine room working on an engine at the Mickey Thompson shop. And when he got back, he called me in his office, and he says, "I hear you guys did pretty good this weekend with your Hellfire Corvette." And I said, "Yeah, we won all 3 days." And he says, "Well, that's great." He says, "I want you to run one of my cars." And that was my goal. 2 things that happened. I never mentioned that Mickey's cars were sponsored by Ford Motor Company. So when I went to work for Ford Motor Company, they had to check me out. And that was my goal, to go to work for Ford Motor Company. Was one of my lifetime dreams years ago, and to work for Mickey Thompson.